Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Friday afternoon. You guys know we got to add a little USC talk on the recruiting trail. And I think it's a fascinating conversation to have where there is clear buzz and momentum with USC on the recruiting trail. And I think I want to start the conversation off with something we've been talking about over the last couple of days and weeks, and that is the trajectory of this USC program. A lot of USC fans are really frustrated with the 3-3 record, and I think USC fans are well within their right to be frustrated with that. I mean, the standard is not 3-3 when you're talking about USC football. That being said, we've continued to say that the 3-3 record, I don't think accurately portrays the trajectory of this USC team. And I think what's even more important is I think a lot of these high school kids certainly agree with that. Although USC is not having the success we expected them to have on the football field in 2024, a lot of these kids still seem to be very interested in what USC can offer and where this USC program is going. And quite frankly, I'm not saying the opinion of USC fans doesn't matter, but I think it matters a lot more how these high school kids view USC than what some fans think about Lincoln Riley and potentially not being the right guy for the job. Want to get into not only Aaron Dunn, who a lot of USC fans know is one of my favorite offensive tackle prospects in this 2025 cycle, but some other targets that you see in 2025 that USC could potentially go after and close over the next couple of weeks and months. Really excited to get into it. Now, before we do, and as always, to the USC fans, it's been a blast talking this program, even though the success on the football field has been a little bit of a roller coaster. One, y'all continue to show a ton of support. That means the absolute world. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. I think it's going to be a fun next couple of weeks and months, not only for USC on the football field, but for this USC team on the recruiting trail as well. Appreciate you guys. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And let's start with Aaron Dunn. This is, I think a massive storyline with this USC team. Where have I been most critical of USC, not only on the football field in 2024, but what they've done on the recruiting trail? Just not enough blue chip elite level talent coming into this program along the offensive line. I've been critical of Josh Henson not getting it done, not in kind of two different categories. One, the talent that he's bringing in. It's just not enough blue chip guys coming in on this offensive line, and the development hasn't necessarily been great. This is an opportunity for Josh Henson to start bringing in some of that talent. And we all know that's where it starts. When you're in the Big Ten, you're going to see very good defensive lines, very good edge rushers every single Saturday. You got to make sure you have the bodies, the talent to block up some of those edge rushers. And you look at where USC has struggled the most, I think most notably in that Michigan game and Minnesota, it's been the offensive tackle spot. I would argue that if you had better offensive tackle play in those football games, you're probably winning both of those games. So you look at Aaron Dunn and say, this is massive for USC and quite frankly, Josh Henson and his job security. Now you get into Aaron Dunn, I think it starts with the athleticism for the size. And at 6'7.5", 290 pounds, it's really hard to find offensive tackles with the size and length that Aaron Dunn has, but also with the feet Aaron Dunn has. And I think it starts with what he does on the basketball court. 17 points per game, 6 boards his junior year. This kid gets it done on the basketball court, and you can see that play out when he's playing offensive tackle. You see a lot of 6'8" offensive tackles really struggle with the footwork, are kind of lumberers. Look at Aaron Dunn and say, this kid's got really, really good feet for that size. And so you're betting on just the length, the size, the athleticism. Now, the thing I think Aaron Dunn needs to continue to work on as a football player is, adding a little bit more physicality. I don't think he's a year one guy for USC at the offensive tackle spot, but year 2, year 3, year 4, this kid's upside, I think, is kind of next level. You look at 6'7.5", 290, it's a little bit of a slender frame. You get him into this USC program, you get him up to 320 pounds. You allow him to maintain the footwork and athleticism. I think this guy has all Big Ten caliber offensive tackle play written all over him. And so I think the high upside for Aaron Dunn is something you're betting on every single day of the week if you're USC and if you're Josh Henson. Him and Carter Smith, that's a nice haul at the offensive tackle spot. That's what it needs to look like if you're USC and Lincoln Riley if you want to have sustained success in the Big Ten. Because you look at where USC's coming along, it's clear to me that they've crushed it on the defensive side of the football in terms of development. These players are getting better. The defense looks better. Look at guys like Kobe Pepe or Devin Tompkins. Desmond Stevens as a freshman, guys that we didn't expect to be contributors 6 months ago are playing some pretty dang good football on the defensive side of the football. They got a real defensive coaching staff that is not only putting a good product on the football field, but getting these kids better. If you can address the personnel specifically on the offensive line, that is, at least in my opinion, one of the boxes that USC, the last box that I think USC needs to check. And that's kind of why I've been so high, not high on Lincoln Riley, but less critical of Lincoln Riley, is that I think Lincoln Riley as a head coach is starting to check a lot of boxes now. As every single box checked? No. And is that why they're losing some football games? Absolutely. If you can check off the last couple of those boxes, I think this USC team is really kind of right there in terms of getting over the hump. And so Aaron Dunn, massive, massive target. It is probably the position that USC fans most want to figure out on the recruiting trail. Now, the next position we got to figure out, continue to stack bodies on the defensive line. And we talk about this all the time. It's not only getting the star talent, but it's getting depth, right? This USC team has clearly struggled with the depth on the defensive line. Kevin Wynn visited USC for that Penn State game. Let's just be frank about it. And you can see the reports, like his commitment to Florida State, it's not very strong. And I think USC knows that. And I think USC is turning it up on Kevin Wynn. And you look at Kevin Wynn and say, this is the exact kind of body that USC needs on the defensive line in the Big Ten. 6'2", 320, kind of that Carlin Jones build, but I think just a little bit more developed than Carlin Jones was coming out of high school. There's a reason that a lot of these SEC programs are also circling the waters on Kevin Wynn, but it does sound like USC has gotten themselves in on this recruitment. I think he can be that dirty work interior defensive lineman that can play the nose, that can play the three tech, but he also brings you some pass rush juice as well because he's a really good athlete for that size. And then you look at Jaem Stewart. I think this is another name that I would say LSU is probably in the lead for Jaem Stewart. But if there's a second team lurking, it's probably USC. If USC can land just one of Kevin Wynn and Jaem Stewart and land Aaron Dunn, you're looking at not only a top 8 class in the country, but I think more importantly, a recruiting class that checks some of the boxes that USC desperately needs to check in terms of getting over the hump, specifically line of scrimmage plays. So Kevin Wynn, Jaem Stewart, Aaron Dunn, those are 3 names that if you're a USC fan, you got to keep an eye on. Now, I want to talk about where USC sits in 2025, and I specifically want to talk about Julian Lewis at the quarterback position. Continues to fall in the rankings according to 24/7 Sports. Now, there was a couple of risers. Hayden Lowe, massive riser, top 50 national prospect now. We liked him when he committed. It's good to see him continue to take those steps. Julian Lewis continuing to fall, it just puzzles me. And this is my biggest critique of how some of these recruiting services like to operate, and quite frankly, how some of these programs like to operate on the recruiting trail as well. It seems like they don't value the film all that much, and they put too much value on what it looks like in the offseason and what the bodies look like. Like Julian Lewis is not going to walk into a room and wow anybody at 6'1.5" or 6.5 feet, 185 pounds. He's not a freaky athlete. That being said, you turn on the film, you look at what this kid does as a football player, the experience that he has coming from the high school ranks. I mean, he's 8-0 right now, 28 touchdowns with a 77% completion percentage in 7A ball down in Georgia. That's some of the best football you see at the high school level across the country. And Julian Lewis continues to just put up numbers and look like such a good football player. Again, he's not going to walk into a room or go to an offseason camp and wow you with a rocket arm. He's not going to wow you in terms of the physical presence that he has, but you turn on the film and say, this kid is, for lack of better terms, like an assassin. He just cuts up defenses, and that's something that matters, right? We see so many quarterbacks. Joe Milton's probably the best example for Tennessee last year, where Joe Milton walks in and says, whoa, that guy looks awesome. He can throw it 1,000,000 miles per hour. He can throw it 100 yards. Love it. But when the lights come on, the pads come on, he's just not that good of a football player. It's the complete opposite for Julian Lewis. This kid is an elite quarterback that continues to show it on the high school football field, but continues to fall because he's not necessarily going to wow you with some of the physical traits. I'm betting on these kids all day. You look at a lot of quarterbacks that are having a ton of success, not only in college, but at the NFL level too. It's about the quarterbacks that know how to play when the lights come on. The quarterbacks that can be extremely accurate, not put the football in harm's way, know what they're doing on the football field. It don't matter about all the physical traits that you have if you don't know what you're doing on a football field, especially at the quarterback position. Now, there are some other positions where I think physical traits matter a little bit more. When you're talking about edge rushers or defensive linemen, you want to bet on the freakiest of freak athletes because that's normally going to work out for you. At the quarterback spot, give me the quarterback that has a massive sample size of being an elite quarterback, especially when they're doing that, and one of the best levels of high school football that you see 7A in the state of Georgia. So if you're USC, you don't really give a dang about what 24/7 says about Julian Lewis. You're continuing to know that you have a quarterback that can step foot on campus and really be a guy for you. That's kind of my take on USC. I think they have a massive opportunity over the next couple of weeks and months. And even though the success hasn't happened on the football field as much as we expected, it doesn't seem to be hindering what USC is trying to do on the recruiting trail. I think it's going to be an exciting next couple of weeks and months. We'll obviously continue to talk about it. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.